I sent via Facebook, and we are live.
Hello.
But we are not posted yet. Hey, Gustavo, how are you doing, man?
Good. I'm doing swell. How about you guys?
Doing sweet, doing sweet. Looking good, Nathalie?
Am I here?
You are here.
Yes.
Great. Am I blurry?
A little bit, but not bad.
I know. I don't want to be blurry.
All right.
Hey, everybody.
Cool. So a quick rundown. I'm going to briefly explain about foundation, what the summit is, and what the consortium are. But the real important thing is after that, I'm going to go to each of us individually, and you're going to intro yourselves and your organizations and talk about what you're going to contribute to the summit and how that's going to help rebuild Puerto Rico as sustainable startup cities.
Okay.
Sound about reasonable?
Sounds very reasonable, Joe.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions before we begin in 5 minutes, just so we can clarify anything? By the way, James, you're looking mysterious in silhouette right now.
That's my jam, man. It's kind of my Banksy thing.
Who is James?
Gotta keep it on the down low, man.
When you're working in the governance as a service industry, yeah, I totally agree.
So question, is this link can be shared like on other than like Reddit or something?
Yep.
So,
So
Luca, do you want to take this one? Yeah.
Yeah, I will send you guys a link to the Reddit AMA in this chat.
Okay. So who am I talking to? As in, can we introduce each other just to know?
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's go down the line. Gustavo, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure thing. Yeah. So basically, I'm originally from San Juan, Puerto Rico. When I was 19 years old, I started working on the sponsorship of 3 government agencies to foster entrepreneurship on the island. So we brought down Teal Fellows, Forbes 30 under 30s, all that mumbo jumbos and buzzwordy like brands. And within 2 years, we were able to incorporate over 56 companies under Law 135. Came back to Babson, graduated, did my thesis on Act 20, Act 22. Decided to come back to the island in August. The hurricane hit the island. And then I asked myself, what is the best way to serve my island, serve my country? And that was basically to get as much data as possible. And that put me in the position of basically going door by door, knocking on the doors of every single mayor and grabbing the data necessary to actually pass it on to other agencies and entities around the world that were looking to help the island. And so that's basically me in a nutshell. And now I'm working on a co-living space called the Hacker House. It's being cleaned up right now, but we're gonna have the opening this Sunday with the team from the BBC and Channel 4 that did the Banksy documentary. They're doing a documentary on crypto on the island, and yeah, we're doing a launch this Sunday.
Oh, wow.
Dope,
Nice.
dope. And we got James here. We only got a couple minutes here, so let's try to keep introductions and get them done. James, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, James, Digital Rain out of San Francisco, working on the consortium building and Impact Accelerator Hackathon and possibly some nightlife.
Woo!
Dope. And Nathalie?
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, I'm done. I'm done.
I am back. I'm Nathalie, and I'm the evangelist of Blue Frontiers. We're a sistering company that is building the floating island project in French Polynesia.
Woo!
Sweet. And Gustavo, is it inaccurate to say that you are part of Restart Week, or you're an organizer of Restart Week?
I am in the Telegram with them. I'm helping them. I don't know if it's okay to say that. Okay. But yeah, we can say it.
We've got enough friends in the Restart Week organization, I think, that we can speak to our partnership.
Perfect.
Yeah, I actually have like a couple of them in front of me right now, of the organizers. So yeah, you can say that I'm well connected and helping them.
Is it Adam Krim?
No, Adam is not here yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Adam actually has a conflicting call, so he won't be able to join.
It's AJ and Gabriel. Sorry.
Okay. Cool.
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good. How are you? How are you, Joe? Hey, everybody.
Hi.
All right, cool. Well, it looks like we're going to go live now. All right, Luca, do you want me to post it to Facebook or shall you?
I'm posting it right now.
Okay, excellent.
Also,
all right, so
really
go ahead,
fast.
Gustavo.
You guys know that there is a march, a protest on May 1st in Puerto Rico. There's like a paro nacional, like the whole country is going at a standstill.
No. When is that?
May 1st.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's up, guys?
All right, cool. As soon as that's posted, Luca, let me know, and then we shall begin.
All right, we're live.
All right,
Welcome, everybody.
everyone. Welcome to the Startup Society's Consortium AMA. Today, we're joined by some incredible people that are joining our consortium to help rebuild Puerto Rico in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria. First, just a little overview of what the Startup Society's Foundation is. The Startup Society's Foundation is a think tank that studies small experimental governments. We believe that creating little decentralized enclaves to experiment with different ideas, we can arrive at better forms of governance. We are not attached to any ideology. We're not libertarian, we're not socialist, we're not environmental, we're all of the above. We're pan-ideological. We try many different things. We are on the libertarian subreddit because many of our audience members are from the libertarian persuasion, and we would just want to do an homage to that. We are doing the summit in Washington, D.C. at George Mason University, May 9th to the 10th as a call to action. Currently, Hurricane Maria has devastated the island, and it is still devastated. They recently had a blackout. The point of the conference is a call to action to bring together a consortium of partners that can take practical steps towards rebuilding the island in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria. Unlike a startup, a normal startup, a startup city requires a whole host of people. It can't be done simply in one's garage. This requires policymakers, local leaders like Puerto Rican entrepreneurs, investors, blockchain entrepreneurs, infrastructure experts. So the conference and the consortium brings everyone under one roof to make sure that everyone has a comprehensive plan and can take practical steps towards that. And we're very thankful that we have a lot of those people here on the call today. And they will be personally explaining who they are, what their organization does, and how they will be contributing to rebuilding Puerto Rico as startup cities. And then we'll be opening up to the floor to the people, the fine people of Reddit, and to the people on our Facebook channel. So I think we should begin with introducing everyone here. Jesse, he is the founder of Tactivate, and he can explain who he is and what he brings to the table.
Sure. Thanks for having me, guys. Yeah, in short, Tactivate does two things. One, we do a lot of work with the military special operations community, and we pull kind of tactics and strategies from special operations and from international disaster response to launch companies, small business, small operating businesses, hand in hand with the veterans in the States. That could be anything from climbing gyms to all kinds of other crazy stuff. The idea is to help veterans understand how their skills are applicable post-service, and to kind of experiment with this idea of how you can fuse military tactics, strategy, and disaster response approaches to disaster response to launching companies. And then we're going to take that cash flow and we fund disaster response operations, which we do kind of on a voluntary basis and out of pocket, kind of like a not-for-profit, although we just fund it ourselves. And we take an entrepreneurial approach to kind of last mile operations. We've been doing it for about 10 years from the Philippines, Haiti, Texas, and kind of a long story short, there's a lot of really well-intentioned groups operating these environments, whether it's local entrepreneurs and foundations, the government and the military do bring a lot of resources to the table, but our whole kind of operating thesis is that it's the local population and the local communities that have the best capabilities and the most effective manner to respond, because they're culturally kind of sensitive. They've got the most vested interest in making sure that their communities are kind of rebuilt. And we just kind of exist as initially as an immediate response group to help connect, the larger resources that are brought to bear with the kind of local players, and then kind of take a step back and see how things evolve. And we tend to get involved with kind of readiness operations, having people understand how to prepare for future occurrences, and looking at, what small businesses can do to play critical roles as kind of a response infrastructure. We believe that it falls to the community to be ready, and it's up to the individual and the business to ensure that they kind of take proactive measures to serve as critical resources in time of need in their communities. And we try to help make that happen. Happy to talk about more in Puerto Rico, what we did or what we're looking to do, if that's helpful.
Perfect. Yeah, if you can just explain a little bit what you're currently doing in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, we initially went in and basically did a kind of a food security project. There was a lot of effort being put into bringing external resources and supplies into the island. It was all over the media. And we just kind of realized early on that a lot of the supplies were available locally, and all these small kind of shop owners had a lot of stuff available and were actually getting undercut by, well-intentioned efforts, but by all the food and water that were being dropped. And the issue was that, they had fought to get their stores on generator. They had fought to kind of keep their stores open and payroll out of their own pockets, but that was not really sustainable. And because the whole telco system was down, their point of sale systems were offline. So we helped kind of reconnect those so people could use the EBT cards or the food stamps to kind of buy food and water locally. It was kind of just after the acute emergency response phase, but it was still kind of made food available to the local population locally as opposed to being dependent externally. And then we kind of took a step back. We did a couple little things where we set up, informal places for people to gather. We try to kind of cross-pollinate people from the government and military and local entrepreneurs. I know a bunch of the guys on this call, so everyone can kind of talk. We did that in the earlier phase, and now we've taken a step back and we're kind of looking at a bunch of different initiatives and how we can help the locals kind of think about creatively how to build readiness in Puerto Rico, how to effectively harness all of these wild and crazy resources that are being brought to bear on the island, and to make sure that they're kind of stewarded in a way that at the end of the day makes the local population more ready, less dependent, and more capable. I don't quite know exactly what that looks like yet, but we've got our hand in a bunch of different things at the moment.
Perfect. I 100% agree. We need to create the tools so Puerto Ricans can govern and economically develop themselves, not just simply rely on handouts. In that vein, maybe we should hear a little bit from Gustavo Diaz about what he's currently doing in Puerto Rico.
Hey guys, so yeah, I'm originally from Puerto Rico, and since the hurricane, I asked myself, what is the best way to help the island that gave birth into me and that I love so dearly, and that was data. Right after the hurricane, all telecommunications went down, most infrastructure was damaged, and there was very, very low access to the data in the communities, and to actually understand who needed what and where and when. And so with my brother and my colleague Miguel, we decided to essentially go out there to every single municipality and get data directly from the mayors. We will look for them, hunt them down, knock on their doors, and say hey, we're trying to pass this information along to their entities and be able to bring resources down here. So that evolved into working with the United Nations Chaplain Association, to the American Christian Churches Association, to different entities, to the point that we joined Foundation for Puerto Rico as part of their team of recovery and intelligence, where over 180 entities were coming in every single week, and we were passing that information along to them. Now that we've basically gone after the recovery phase of the island and having the immediate need to ensure that everyone has water and food, there's still some communities that still need water and food like crazy. But now we're trying to find a way, how do we essentially create more workshops to design with resiliency in mind? That's the reason why David is here, and David's sister and Alicia just flew in yesterday, and we'll be doing different workshops with local students here. But right now I'm focusing, given the new shifts in demographics and the new visitors to the island, into finding a way to glue locals with new residents with the establishment of the first co-living space on the island called the Hacker House. That's essentially what I'm doing. If you guys want more background, like since I'm 19 years old, I've worked under the sponsorship of 3 government agencies, trying to build as many startups as possible with different youth and different talents on the island and connecting them, being the bridge for all these resources, mentorship, and education. That's essentially who I am, what I'm doing, where I come from, and where we're headed with the Hacker House.
Awesome, awesome. So yeah, none of the stuff will get done unless we have Puerto Rican entrepreneurs leading the charge and making an entrepreneurial ecosystem like Gustavo here. So Gustavo briefly mentioned what David is doing on the island. David, do you want to explain who you are and what you do for the island and what you can bring to the consortium?
Yeah, thank you. No problem, Joe. Thanks for everyone for having me, by the way. My name is David Alvarez Geeter. I'm a child of the diaspora, if you will. I did not grow up in Puerto Rico, but I have my family is Puerto Rican, and I have a strong affinity to bring a lot of the resources that I've gained over time, people I've met, and skills I've gained to the island at this moment. I'm currently based in LA, just moved here from the Bay Area, and I've been going back and forth on the island to kind of understand for the last 2 years what the long-term economic development opportunities look like for the island from a sustainability perspective. And so my background from a startup world is I was one of the early members of StartX, the Stanford Startup Accelerator. I helped brand them and put on a lot of their demo days and campus demo days that are still running. But my focus was I identify as an ecopreneur, so looking to see how impact entrepreneurship can happen when it comes to environmental challenges, particularly with respect to climate change, and the kind of readiness or resiliency, similarities of how we talk about that for the island. And I'm bringing like an island ecology background. I studied in Hawaii when I was out doing field research, and so. And what my thesis was about early stage impact metrics and how they can be used for our sustainable development goals. People talk a lot about the SDGs, but that's kind of one, I would argue, a little simpler of a set of metrics that we need in terms of actually looking at the projected impact and after impact of any kind of development project. Right now, since that was happening as a kind of as a transition strategy, I'm one of the certified promoters of new business for Puerto Rico, which means I'm a private sector partner to the DDEC and can bring in new companies, new business opportunities to the island under the Act 20 and 22 law, which Gustavo is an expert on as well. And what I've tried to do is pretty much see how these tax incentive opportunities can stimulate sustainable growth opportunities, improve the ROI of early stage and of early stage companies and existing technologies that want to come and support the new infrastructure that we now need 100%. So focus on transition before the hurricane, after everything has become more apparent and immediate, and the call for a sustainable model or a resilient model. But those words are kind of interchangeable, and I think that by making a standardized system and shared agenda that people can buy into and support impact investment projects, that's where we want to come in. And that has a lot of support for kind of starts on a small scale, can do anything from in the remote regions and agriculture to an urban city scale initiative. So we're looking to put those metrics into play to hold people that are relocating to the island accountable to those metrics that want to support those initiatives, and then also give entrepreneurs from the bottom up, either who are already from Puerto Rico, who are coming back to Puerto Rico like myself, or who are coming to Puerto Rico for the first time, to get on the shared agenda when it comes to sustainable growth. Mm-hmm. I think you're on mute, Joe. Sorry.
Thank you for reminding me about that.
All right.
But going to the point of the Puerto Rican diaspora, it's absolutely crucial that we have these enclaves of prosperity, so people that are currently in the States who could not find opportunities in Puerto Rico can come back to Puerto Rico and populate it and rebuild their communities. But that can only happen when we have, an entrepreneurial community that can actually build it up, and that requires a lot of infrastructure and policy changes to make that happen. Right. To talk a little bit about that legal infrastructure that's necessary to form an entrepreneurial ecosystem, I would love to hear more from Tom Bell and how he can contribute to the consortium.
Hi, I'm Professor Tom W. Bell, and I'm the author of this book, Your Next Government, which talks all about special jurisdictions, and Puerto Rico is an interesting example. That's why it's so interesting to me. Unlike some of you, I haven't had the chance to visit, don't have a lot of ties, but I do know Puerto Rico was one of the first SEZs, special economic zones, in the world. It was created in 1948 to help stimulate commerce and industry. It was a federal program, and I guess you could say it worked well. Wasn't done perfectly. And today still, Puerto Rico is kind of a special jurisdiction because of its special tax status, which I suppose benefits it. There are trade-offs. And because it's really hammered by the Jones Act, which is federal legislation that basically chokes off Puerto Rico from international commerce. Well, Puerto Rico is making some changes, and I want to study it more and share what I've learned with you at the upcoming summit. And I hope someday to see Puerto Rico implement some special zones. I've written some proposals for that. I think really what Puerto Rico needs, if I may venture a bold proposal, is it needs special jurisdictions where entrepreneurs can escape some of the regulations that are holding them back right now, like the Jones Act. Not everywhere in Puerto Rico, just a few areas with deep reforms. Not everywhere an inch deep. Just pick a few small areas and see what happens. I think good things will happen if we do it right. Thanks, Joe.
Oh, I'm muted again. I gotta stop doing that. Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate that. So another person here that's more of the legal and legal innovation sector of the consortium is Nathalie Mezza-Garcia, who's with the Seasteading Institute. Nathalie, do you want to comment on how seasteading can be a way to create experiments in different policies in Puerto Rico?
Absolutely, Joe. So our project is about seasteading. I am the evangelist of Blue Frontiers, which means that I evangelize for the creation of new communities on the ocean, communities that float, communities that have more freedom in the regulations, where it is the same individuals who are going to be affected by a decision-making or a law or a regulation, those who decide how the regulations should be. So actually, the project in Puerto Rico has many similarities with what we've been working on in the last 10 years, because Blue Frontiers is a spin-off from the Seasteading Institute. You might have heard from it. And so both what you are doing there in Puerto Rico and what seasteading advocates in favor of is in the creation of bottom-up self-organized community that own themselves. So we've been exploring how to use the most spearhead technologies to create this type of communities, which is very similar to what you are doing in Puerto Rico. So we have many technologies in common. We have the blockchain. We also have legal technologies that those that Tom has just mentioned. Tom, by the way, is one of our legal advisors. So we have technologies like the blockchain technologies that are legal. We also have sustainable energy systems production. We also need to think, okay, if we are going to create a community that is self-sustainable and autonomous and it's far there in the middle of the ocean, how are people going to feed themselves? So we also need to think in terms of food sustainability, modes of production that are also sustainable in the long term. So basically, we share the fact that we are both tackling bottom-up approaches using the most spearhead technologies that exist right now and also legal regulations that we can think of. And yeah, I'm here. I'm going to be here for the next many minutes, so feel free to ask anything.
So we've got one of our first questions here, and anyone can jump in and answer the question at will, since now we've done all of our intros. What can we do to prepare for the next hurricane or the next disaster in Puerto Rico? Tom, are you going? Go ahead, Gustavo.
So I think like one of the best things to prepare is actually what Jesse was working on regarding understanding the local infrastructure and how the community already organizes it. Because when you walked into those supermarkets, they were filled to the brim. And there was absolutely no need of having helicopters and giant semi-trucks take food and water to places that already have it. I think that is like step number one. How can you get all of these supermarkets to have some sort of resiliency solution that can build upon those systems? I think Jesse can speak more about that because that's an insane type of project that I think he like mentioned a lot about it during the intro.
I've seen two problems with the
yeah, thanks, Gustavo. Yeah, I think.
Yep.
Go ahead. Sorry. You gonna take that or?
Take it, Jesse.
Yeah, just to kind of Gustavo's point, I think that the dynamic in disaster response is, and this is from the top down, and actually I would say even the bottom up, has been very reactionary in general. Certainly not just in Puerto Rico, but in the United States, world, and we really need to kind of facilitate a paradigm shift, if you will. We're kind of realize that if a little bit of proactive measures are taken, everyone benefits. Whether it's the local community, the business owners, those inflicted. There's a lot of resources and capability and capacity that is available locally, and very simple, cost-effective measures can be put into place. Hopefully ahead of any kind of impact that would enable the community to serve as a resource base for itself without having to depend on huge amounts of external aid, which I would personally argue in a lot of ways is far more detrimental to the overall recovery and well-being of an impacted region. Certainly there's an acute phase when life-saving supplies are needed, but I'm a big believer just in things that I've seen and people I've worked with, especially in Puerto Rico, the young entrepreneurial community, the established business community. There's amazing resources. Whether it's from communications perspective or access to food and water, things can be done very easily to kind of proactively preempt these kind of needs on external resources and subject matter experts and supplies.
So if the question was specifically about rebuilding Puerto Rico and making sure it's not hit again so hard by a hurricane, I'd say three things. Let's talk about building codes. Right now, they have among the strictest building codes in the world in Puerto Rico. The buildings are, well, even then, the buildings are designed to withstand winds of 125 miles an hour. Maria was 175. You can't plan for black swans. Still, it could be done better. So they have strict codes, so you're thinking, why did everything get hit so hard? Enforcement is really crummy. About 55% of the buildings aren't up to the code that's on the books. And why enforcement is not so good, we could talk about. It's a separate question. The third thing is... this is the classic problem, the classic solution that creates a problem. The government sees a problem, it hits it with the biggest hammer it can find, which in this case is the strictest building code out there, the International Building Code. But it's too hard. It's not designed properly for the environment. So what Puerto Rico needs to try, at least in some special jurisdictions, is not a building code that imposes certain requirements in terms of your materials or design, but rather specification-based building codes. And what you do is you say, you have to build your building either by an approved plan or by something that will withstand these parameters. And you let designers and engineers go to work and they find solutions. They don't go to a rule book to look up what's already been approved. Puerto Rico could be at the leading edge of designing hurricane-resistant infrastructure, but you have to liberate entrepreneurs to have innovative designs. Special jurisdictions can do that, so that's what I recommend. Thank you.
Excellent. One thing, we actually skipped over one of our consortium members, so briefly before we move on to the next question, because we're getting a couple, James, can you intro yourself and what you're bringing to the table with the consortium?
Yeah. James Hanusa out of San Francisco with Digital Rain. My partner Allison Arabi and I started this organization which focuses on emerging technology, social impact, and consciousness mindfulness. We have a online impact community that is about 3,000 right now that looks at VR, AR, AI, blockchain, and other exponential technologies. We're part of a 50 agency purpose collaborative. And we got a large network of partners as well that we're bringing to the table. I am also a co-founder of UIX Global, who's another partner here, Blue Frontiers, Firon Global, and Versus.io. So we've got a lot of folks already that we're bringing to the party. Started working on Puerto Rico back in November when I was invited to a IEEE World Bank World Economic Forum meeting focused on connectivity. and built up a consortium then around demonstration projects on the ground. Didn't find the funding for it then, but did rally a large number of organizations, brought that to Startup Society Foundation, and we decided that one of the key outputs for this event as Digital Rain's fulfilling an impact partner relationship is to help build that consortium, and through a impact accelerator hackathon that we're looking to hold on May 8th, we will have those consortium partners present projects they want to do on the ground, as well as have a hackathon that will be a bit of a catalyst for a May 11th hackathon that's happening in Puerto Rico as part of Restart Week, with a similar focus of VR, AI, big data, and blockchain.
Excellent. And one of the questions that people have been giving us about the consortium, including on Reddit, is we have a consortium with people from multiple different sectors. Sometimes people think that they conflict. In fact, one asked, don't the goals of sustainable development and blockchain conflict? Is there anyone here who wants to talk about that?
I would love to talk about that. My straight answer is, of course, not. No, not at all. In fact, you can use the blockchain to enhance processes that have to do with sustainable development. And I mentioned our project. Our project is called the Floating Island Project in French Polynesia. And it is assisted. It's the first assisted prototype that will exist in the world. And we have really strict sustainability standards, to the point where our architects in the Netherlands have stated, we not only want to be sustainable, we are going to be restorative, which means that we are going to design the project in a way that the platforms that we put underwater can somehow help restore the life of small sessile organisms and small fish and marine life underneath the platform. So how can we use these new buildings to create more life, right? And at the same time, well, they don't conflict because the way in which we are crowdsourcing for a project is by means of an ICO. So completely the opposite. We can definitely use the fact that for the first time in a long time in human history, we have the possibility to decentralize where funding comes from, and we no longer need to rely on big governments or in big corporations. We can actually now take it in our own hands and do it ourselves. And if our goal is to create new sustainable communities, and if we can crowdfund this so that the more people can be part of it, and also we can make it in a really bottom-up way, welcome. Come, make it come. So the answer is no. They don't coexist. Completely the opposite. We live in a world where finally we have these really interesting technology tools that can lead us finally to a more environmentally friendly and sustainable future. And what my conversations that I've had with Joe are that show that also the project in Puerto Rico seems to be taking that same direction. So, no.
Absolutely.
Joe, can I give that a take?
Hey, go ahead, James.
So I think I was trying to put together what the concern might be or why that impression might be, and I think that maybe it's the energy resources that cryptocurrency mining take. I'm thinking that probably that's not going to be happening on the island. That the mining will continue to happen where low-cost energy is available. Think about Washington State, Iceland with the hydro or the geothermal. But the application of the blockchain and the deployment of cryptocurrencies, what we're looking for in the consortium partners is to find organizations or engaged organizations that have solutions for Maslow's, bottom of the pyramid. So shelter, water, energy, add connectivity to that, and find the most regenerative solutions and use the blockchain for power, for agriculture, for food supply chains. So that's where these integration points come. And there's a number of solutions. There's a growing movement within the blockchain crypto world for social impact, both organizationally, and if people don't know this, there's a influx of entrepreneurs from the crypto blockchain community that are moving to Puerto Rico to do this work, to help build out the infrastructure and ecosystems. Yes, the 2.6% capital gains tax is a draw, but they're coming with goodwill and they're bringing their friends. So I think they're going to be an important part of the community to partner with the local institutions and citizens of Puerto Rico on developing, co-creating and developing and deploying solutions together.
If I might add a little bit to that, just coming from the perspective of how those collaborations can be facilitated, I think to James' point, I think there's definitely opportunities for blockchain and cryptocurrencies in Puerto Rico to be sustained and supported by a clean energy system, and that's what the island also needs. And so there's a number of entrepreneurs, I know Gustavo's been in close touch with a lot of them, who are actually kind of moving the chain forward in terms of setting up the nodes of new infrastructure, and that's going to be an exciting part to the way that we understand our energy use. But yeah, as James, as folks have mentioned, there's an opportunity to create those strict code of standards that create design challenges. And what we need for folks that are both coming into Puerto Rico, folks that are coming from all different places, and folks that are there, is that shared agenda, and that is where blockchain and kind of tokenizing that value is the real opportunity that I've seen, and that we want to actually move forward and work with the consortium on in the creation of a seed token that kind of like generates that kind of resilience index and takes that value on an impact market basis, right? So you have your power, your energy, you have different biomes, you have your terrestrial challenges, you have your you have your agroforestry challenges, and then in a city development as well too. From that bottom up, you have a whole number of strict codes and standards or specifications, I should say, that are going to lead to that generative activity. And so the ability to allow for all sorts of capital to plug into those models to get those blended, to get that blended capital, to get that spectrum of returns. And I think the real big foundation for all of this, there's a lot of different ways to understand environmental impact, and I think that's where kind of we can be stuck in the weeds. But there's a way to integrate that from a common base of well-being for the island, and you can look at well-being from all these different market perspectives and how that's being promoted, a well-being and resiliency or readiness in that respect. And so that's something that I'm really adamant in supporting and bringing to the table, and kind of creating that explicit shared agenda that can be held accountable by the blockchain as well too, for all collaborators involved. And so and to the point about crowdsourcing that and connecting that to our diaspora in Puerto Rico. What I see as a tremendous opportunity, what I'm working a little closely with Gustavo on doing, is to get out the word to the diaspora that we have an opportunity to crowdsource that and be ahead of the curve of getting that initial private equity investment that starts these sustainable transformations happening on the island and builds that future fund, if you will. And so there's tremendous opportunity with that. There's 5.5 million of us throughout the U.S. and UK, and there's 3.5 and declining, unfortunately, on the island. So there's a tremendous opportunity where from an equitable and sustainable framework that we can crowdsource that and hold it accountable, and then also create the most innovative solutions from that. So that's what I'm really excited about as well.
Excellent. Excellent. Does anyone else want to take that question? We have another one in the docket. All right, cool. So Zeppelin asks, so what are we going to do? Are we going to give Puerto Ricans a loan or helping out with the building plans for free? What would be the role of the consortium in financing and implementing it? So perhaps I can take that one and people can chime in. The role of the consortium is to bring together the people who do have the capital and people who do have the expertise and put them together into one room. We don't want to give Puerto Ricans a loan. And historically, when you give a state a loan, they don't really pay it back, and it tends to be pretty burdensome, especially in Latin America. So it's probably not a good idea to do that. However, there are plenty of private firms and private organizations and NGOs that would be perfectly willing to put down their money and demonstrate their ideas to people. The problem is when you rely on organizations like FEMA or the United States federal government to do that, they don't have any incentive to actually make it a long-term growth opportunity. For them, it's simply to virtue signal that they're actually doing something to their voters. It doesn't actually have to be productive in the long run. Now, that's not to say that the government isn't an important partner or can't be effective in helping out in relief. It is that they currently are not, and we're not using the types of partners that we do need in order to rebuild. Gustavo, you're saying something.
That one of the most common phrases that we listened to weeks after the hurricane was that these agencies are well in moving 1,000 nails, but when it comes to moving one, it's very complex. And that's where the synergies and the relationship with the local organizations, the local entities that are willing to go down there and do the extra mile is the most crucial part of it. So in terms of the capital and how it's administered, we're now in the phase of having to do those very little one-time things that locals with the local capacity, local understanding, and the local comprehension of how the ecosystem works, who's who, and who's the most capable to do this comes in. And I think that is the role of the consortium is to empower those locals. That instead of arguing, to start focusing on rebuilding the things that matter the most. That, for example, if you have a house that's 3 hours and 20 minutes up into the mountains of the island that most people don't know where it is, we go there, give them solar, give them water purification system, give them whatever it is that is needed. And by saying we, it's not saying us in particular. It can be other entities, other organizations that can execute and who already know that level of expertise already, which, again, going back to the Foundation for Puerto Rico, there were over 180 entities coming in and out every single week from one co-working space. There's already a plethora of co-working spaces around the island, so you can imagine the magnitude in which there are organizations on the ground with boots walking and jumping and running that know what they're doing, who can ensure to move that one nail from A to B.
So, on the funding question, I think what we are intending to do is to bring together a large group of organizations that are wanting to work with the local citizens in Puerto Rico on demonstration projects. We believe that there will be investors, corporations in those conversations. In the summit overall, I'm thinking about BuildCoin and their intent to bring large infrastructure projects, for example. However, we do not have those funding mechanisms completely nailed down yet. We want to first bring together a large enough aggregation of projects that we can take to different funders and say, like, here is 10, 20, 40 projects and a group that's willing to go do them. And we need X amount of dollars. What can you contribute to that? Or which project would you like to fund? But we've got a portfolio then of projects that are ready to go, focused on the regenerative redevelopment of Puerto Rico.
I'll jump in there for a second too. There's still time on this one.
Go ahead.
I was just at a whole of governance conference at William & Mary. And, the notion was, how does DOD and State Department, work better with more unconventional organizations? What is the role for entrepreneurship and national security, stability, and that, an environment after a disaster is, it's a stability environment, stability operations. It's a hot mess from top down, bottom up. There's a major issue, and the government knows that. With how FEMA operates. Puerto Rico is really kind of an interesting use case given its territorial status, and that FEMA responded, and there's a whole plethora of issues there. However, one thing I kind of caution against and think is, it's interesting when these kind of consortiums come together is, as Gustavo mentioned, at the end of the day, it really is important for there to be a ground capacity and people who understand the local terrain, understand how to actually get things done. You can say, hey, this kind of system will be accepted here, and this kind of infrastructure will work, as opposed to having a large body of however well-intentioned foreigners like any of us kind of come in and say, oh, well, we've got this great idea, we're going to do this and it's going to work here. The idea of experimentation is awesome. I think it needs to happen. But just one thing that I think this consortium can kind of help potentially, and what's interesting about Puerto Rico is I've seen this happen personally a number of times where these types of groups come together and it's really well-intentioned. It's, the amazing young entrepreneurs and local organizations get a tremendous amount done for their communities. But then storm season hits again somewhere else. And, the same cycle happens again and again and again. Puerto Rico can potentially be a use case for how do we change the dynamic, how do we change the relationship between, you know, government organizations and resources that are brought to bear, and really identifying and accepting and understanding and empowering local resources, co-working spaces, foundations, what have you. You know, what is the role for the massive influx of opportunistic capital, whether that's, you know, experimentation with infrastructure or blockchain or whatever the incentives may be? How do you steward that in a way that is equitable and not, predatory in nature? So, you know, to bring it back to the funding question, there is a tremendous amount of funding and, you know, raised funds that are out there that are going to be allocated to Puerto Rico already. You know, the question becomes, how do you steward that, and how do you, you know, ensure that this $50 billion or $70 billion, whatever it ends up being, doesn't just, you know, vanish, and using this as an opportunity to kind of, you know, change the way these types of things unfold in future geographies.
So that's actually a really good vein that I think we should all go down. What are steps that we can take to make sure that this consortium is stewarded in a way that's for the benefit and controlled by local Puerto Ricans, and that it's not opportunistic and it's there for the long run? How can we do that?
Well, I think part of it comes down to models of ownership when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to land, when it comes to like life support systems of the island, if you will, things that will require it to be self-sufficient. I think that will baking in certain models of ownership within the way that, and I think that there's really cool opportunities within the SEZ framework to do that, and that necessarily haven't been experimented with. I know that Gustavo is has a very good insight as to real estate on the island, and also the demographics of our island changing, with the elderly population being the majority landowners. And you have people like, you know, myself, who have a grandfather in Puerto Rico, who are also is like returning to the island as well too, and is you know, trying to bring those kind of to be part of the change that is occurring as well too. So I think in the way that things are funded, if we're thinking about blended capital coming in, we have to kind of be creative in the process of which that's like tiered, or the way that those rounds or those tokens or things like that are allocated from the get-go, to also ensure to also, if we're, you know, also to just be about the radical transparency that I think comes from this blockchain and decentralization wave. And well, I guess it's a very large wave, but you know, I think that there's those things that I think about first. And then the other part is about competition and collaboration. I think that my biggest frustration, I believe, in the entrepreneurship community is trying to squeeze innovation through a competitive model. And you lose a lot of nutrients in the process. And if there's one good, nature is one of the best collaborators, and you also have competition in nature too. But I think we need to look at those kind of levers of collaborative processes that we can start to innovate from and learn from. I think design thinking frameworks are very good at helping to do that. And as Gustavo mentioned, my sister Annalise is working on a design thinking workshop right now in Puerto Rico. And so there's like different like kind of tool sets in the ways in which that we look at the process that I think is going to ultimately yield the best fruits. And thinking about how we create models of shared IP when it comes to, you know, entrepreneurs on the ground collaborating with folks coming in. And yeah, just models of ownership in that sense, because I think that the opportunity for Puerto Rico is to show a new economic model, and add value in ways that are not extractive, that add value in ways that are collaborative and harmonious to, you know, to natural resources, if you will, but just to community well-being, if you will. So that's, I think all those things, there was huge opportunities, but I think it's going to take a really unique process in order to achieve that.
So one way that I would suggest, and I think it's sort of off of David's point, that we can have a sort of collaborative share of value that would be raised in these startup cities, is sort of a standard practice within special economic zones. They have a funding mechanism called the land lease model. In this case, a private organization, they own the land and they send it out to developers. They lease it out to developers. And essentially, instead of having normal taxation, what they have is that everyone pays rent, and that land lease revenue goes to a company. One thing that we can do that can align everyone's incentives and everyone can benefit is that on the outset of creating this special economic zone, we give shares of that land lease revenue to citizens. So not only do they see the increased value that come from a startup city because of more economic activity, higher demand, and because of higher prices in land leases, and thus Puerto Rican citizens benefit from it. It's also because they actually have an incentive to maintain the land and make sure that it is viable in the long run. So perhaps if we go for special economic zones in a traditional funding model, it can be a way to bring together the environmental and the prosperous. Tom, you're an expert on special economic zones. Do you have anything to add on the land lease model and how it could potentially be used in Puerto Rico?
I'm glad you raised it, Joe. I agree with you that deserves a look, especially because I really like how it kind of cuts across polarizing dichotomies. It's on the one hand, it's of course super capitalistic in the sense it would involve the shares of a company and getting distributions from the company. On the other side, it's, I don't want to say collective, but it's very social, right? It says people who live here own the community. And I wrote about that very scenario in my book. It's called, I have a whole chapter in there about how owned communities really, I think, are something, well, I really want to say it's going to be our future, but really we should be so lucky. I do think they're coming down the pike. I think if we do it right, it can be wonderful. It can teach everybody, left and right, some lessons and, you know, give good results to people. I'll just add to what Joe suggested. So again, Joe's proposal, which I like too, is have a community generate revenues that go to people who own shares in the community who live there. So if the community is doing great, they can get money in their pocket. I'll add to that, you might consider, I don't talk about this so much in the book, but it's one of those charming features that borrowing the tools of capitalism can let you do. You know, Joe's scenario would work great for the people living in the community. You got to worry about envy of people living outside the walls. And you can dress it up as NIMBY or environmental concerns. There's lots of ways to hide what is essentially envy because you don't like to see your neighbors doing better than you. So what you could do, I'm not saying this is cheap, doing the right thing often is not. This is just prudent. You could argue it's right, but it's at least prudent. You distribute non-voting shares of the self-same collectively owned city to the neighbors. So now when the neighbors see, say a truck's coming in from the port and it's taking in a load of asphalt so they can lay some roads down in the fancy new community next door and it breaks down, they got a share of this community in their pocket. So they're going to help that truck get out of the ditch. And when that city gets big, of course, it'll benefit their economy eventually. But they'll be changing their lives. They might not like that. I get it. But they could say, that's my city too. I got a piece of that. They gave it to me and they'll get that truck out of the ditch. I'll stop there. Thank you.
And if I can add on that part and touch a little bit more about policy, given the Jobs Act, it allows us to have small crowdfunding opportunities. Like we can do that through different cryptos and different tokens. But just by building, for example, an electronic real estate investment trust, you're able to have communities put $400, $500 per person and be able to start getting them inside a model that will provide them a return on that asset and on that project. And that brings us like different topics of conversations right now. For example, like my mother lost her employment and she was a government officer for 30 years. And now her retirement fund is just being cut to pieces. And I'm single-handedly dealing with that and trying to grow that for her. And there are dozens of thousands of people who are in the same situation. And given the policy that we find ourselves with, and also technologies such as cryptocurrencies and tying blockchain to all these developments, it allows to create a transparency model and allows us to create that opportunity for people to actually hold a piece of the land in synergy, in togetherness with people who are actually knowledgeable and can build essentially the future of the island.
I am so glad that we mentioned this subject because just a few days ago, Joe and I were recording a podcast, and one of the subjects that came out was how does it really benefit for people who are actually involved in a project, in a space, in a territory, to be those who make decisions. And we were talking about how the blurry line between, like Tom said, very capitalist or anarcho, we are talking specifically about the blurry line that there really is in reality between anarcho-capitalism and anarcho-communism, where they both share even the principle of exclusion. So it is true that for you to care about the development of a community, you need to have shares in it. And that is true for very capitalistic projects, and it's also true for very collectivistic projects. So there are many things that they share, and the principle of property sustains even in cases where people think, no, this is not capitalistic and not related to private property at all, so therefore it doesn't stand. But no, yeah, I'm very glad that we are talking about these very hybrid or mixed systems where we no longer only rely on the state to solve our problems. However, we do see them as potential partners, and we no longer rely only on the market on its own, for example, protecting the environment or creating systems that are sustainable. Instead, I'm really happy that we are thinking about all these hybrid models, or hierarchical as I call them, to build a high-tech sustainable future.
Excellent. So let's answer one more question here. We got about 10 more minutes in the AMA. I think we've covered a lot of ground. So the question is, how can, so let me get the camera on me. So the question is, how can someone who doesn't have a lot of financial resources, how can they contribute to helping out the rebuilding of Puerto Rico? Jesse, David, or Gustavo, I think you have the best answers for that one.
I think right now it's basically, we need to start focusing on models that are inclusive and can bring people together for that matter. And more than anything, allows us to build a more, how do I say this? Build ownership into these models that are being developed, be it a zone to build a city or a zone to build different products or different, what do you call this? Different ventures. Essentially move the diaspora, like push, mobilize these individuals to invest into the local companies and help help the businesses that are actually growing and basically making the economy turn and grow even during a hurricane. Because one of the initiatives that was done by Denise Rodriguez, another speaker at the Foundation, the Startup Societies, she's with Colmena 66, and she built an online store that was called Shop and Hire. So you could either shop from a local or hire a local. I think that type of model can be taken an even further step, which is investing directly into different products and businesses that are being established right now on the island and can survive another category for hurricane.
Excellent, excellent. So another question that we have is, what are some of the, would you see as a benefit that people are coming to the island for Act 22 and Act 20 benefits? Or do you think that's just window dressing to the bigger problem?
Can you repeat that again?
Yeah. So do you think that Act 20 and Act 22 benefits can really help the island, or they'll just bring rich people there and they'll just park their money and not do anything with it?
I can answer this a bit. I think that it really does depend. I think currently, as one of the promoters of these tax incentives, I definitely come to a point where I at a conflict in terms of, okay, well, these incentives, if looked at from a single bottom line perspective, definitely go to promoting, activities that that don't necessarily support the island. And I think that one of the things Gustavo and I talk about a lot is the change in the corporate tax rate from 6% to 4% before the hurricane happened, and already that's a pretty good deal when it comes to saving a lot on federal income tax and capital gains, and there's other property tax and municipal tax incentives that are on top of that. That 2%, in terms of additional funding that can go into the infrastructure and public goods and services of the island, could be a really awesome source of capital in terms of creating a fund that's based on sustainable infrastructure development for the island. And that's something that I think about in terms of just how there can be explicit ways in which folks that are relocating to the island can get involved and actually have a measurable kind of return on the dollars that they are investing into Puerto Rico. And I think that still represents a tremendous amount of capital that within models that we're exploring and the kind of bottom-up activities that we would like to see could really, send a solid signal, a good faith that people that are here to do business and bring their business and their resources are also in good faith supporting the integrity and resilience of the island. So I think there's that comes into play. Obviously, you can't. I think making a shared agenda and getting the right people who are already committed to those ideas, and I met a few of them already, on the same page, getting that out there in a more public way, or just making that something that kind of becomes a little bit more standardized in itself. But I think just that conversation, I think we, from going from 6% to 4%, and then how, we really do need a tremendous amount of capital still ongoing to support, programming and initiatives and infrastructure on the island. I think that's like one way to kind of utilize an existing framework and existing value, if you will, to start, funding capital in that direction. And then also with respect to the folks that are in the crypto community, I went out there because I myself would, as someone who's lived in the Bay Area for a long time, has been involved in many different communities out there that are now, which is very interesting, coming to the island. It was really good to see that there are folks that have really good intention on trying to bring leapfrogging technologies that are going to create these alternative economic foundations for the island too. And at the same time, I think as long as we're all on a shared agenda that's accountable, then it's really just a matter of experimenting from there. Mm-hmm.
So if I can add to the part of the foundation, I think one of the biggest concerns right now is is the Act 20 and the Act 2022 work? Will it be good for the island of Puerto Rico? And I think the concern is rooted on the past experiments performed in the island of Law 936. That was an exemption over the IRS from 1976 to 1996 that ended in 2006. And then you had the Bootstrap Plan back in 1948 with the creation of this first special economic zone in 1947. Those two models kind of failed the island. And it can be traced back to one simple variable, actually two, which was A, the subsidizing of different employments, and B, these companies, these enterprises that were coming in here, there was no way to retain them. Act 20 and Act 22, it is designed by default for these individuals and these corporations to buy up land, to buy up real estate, essentially retaining that capital and that human capital on the island. I think that by how these two laws are designed, it's creating a foundation, but it's not enough. There needs to be more done to actually involve locals to partake and receive some sort of those benefits as well, and build up from there. So yeah, just by design, the Act 20, Act 22, it's there to actually retain the capital until the year 2035, 2040, which is where it's going to be considered either for these laws to be extended by another 10 or another 15 years.
Hey, I just want to thank you two guys for making Article 20 and 22 a lot clearer to me. Thank you. Good job.
No problem.
That's what the consortium is for. Bring everyone, clarify everyone's thinking. So we have 3 minutes left in the call. So I think that it would be best to discuss from the people here what they see as the biggest obstacles and opportunities for the consortium and for Puerto Rico to build sustainable startup cities moving forward.
I'll jump on it. I think that what's happening here is an awesome example of kind of call it local capacity building, or kind of joining unconventional resources together, right? Just to talk and to share creative ways of tackling problems. I think it's just would behoove the consortium or any other groups doing this, not to silo and not to isolate. I mean, what's happening here is a great kind of multidisciplinary approach, if you will, but there's also a lot of other resource groups and dynamics at play, whether that is government or whether that is, FEMA or what have you. And granted, we've all seen the shortcomings and challenges, with like dealing with these large organizations. But, I think it was Gustavo that touched on this earlier. If there is a readily accessible, well-identified consortium of people that can be accessed by, I get emails all the time from people in FEMA and, various, parts of the government saying, hey, how do we get involved with this? Who's doing that? If there's a group that's stewarding all of these different pockets of resources and subject matter expertise and is directing it in a way, kind of last mile, that is respectful to what the actual needs are on the ground, and will have some sort of sense of longevity, I think that would be very valuable, if that makes sense.
I think that was an excellent note to end on, to be completely honest. Everyone, thank you so much for joining the call. I'm really honored to be a part of such amazingly dedicated, intelligent people, and they're finally getting together under one roof to start working on this. People have obviously been working to help make Puerto Rico better and help it rebuild, but I think we're taking a very unique approach to it, and I think we're taking, as Jesse said, a very multidisciplinary approach, and I think that we're going to bear a lot of fruit. Everyone, I'll see you all in Washington, D.C. Everyone watching, likewise, and come and join us and be part of the consortium. It's time to stop arguing about this. People's lives are in danger. They're without power a lot of times. Their economy is stagnating. It's time to start building. So we'll see you in DC. Everyone, thank you so much.
Thank you. See you in DC.
Bye.
Yeah.